one of the main things that XML is used for is to structure and describe information. So let's take a look at an example of that now. To illustrate this example, we'll consider some information that you typically find on a business card, such as a person's name, various phone numbers, maybe an email address, and there might be some additional information on a business card, but just to keep the example simple, let's just say that this is some fairly common data. Okay, so which one is my work number? Well, you don't know, right? Which is why business cards usually also provide things like labels that clearly identify what the information needs. So once the labels are visible, you can say, oh, okay, the work number is the 800 number, and there are other numbers on there that mean different things. But those labels are there to describe the information that's on the business card. And this is an example of what XML does. It applies description and structure to the data that you're working with. So if we were to take the same example and look at it in XML, we might be able to structure it in a certain way. So for example, I might have a tag called business card. And the business card tag might be the root tag that holds the other data, like so for example, a name. And then there might be various tags like phone. And the phone tag might have an attribute that describes what kind of phone it is, home, work, mobile. And then there's a tag for email. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, wait a second, business card tag? Phone tag? I've never seen anything like this. And you're right. Now, if there was a business card XML tag set existing that I could use to solve this data problem, I could go ahead and use it. Now, imagine for a moment that there was no such XML standard, and the truth is I don't know if there is or there isn't, but I decided to sit down and create my own XML language called business card. Remember, the X in XML stands for extensible. So if you have a particular data-related problem or task and you want to use XML to solve it, you can either use an existing XML language if there is one, but if there isn't one, just make one up. So I sat down and said, well, if I'm going to structure a business card in XML, I'll probably need a root tag, and I'll just call that business card. And then I made up the tags, name and phone and email. And if I wanted to add other tags like address and so on, I could go ahead and do that. Now, once I've done this, once I've collected this data here in XML, I can now take this XML data and give it to any other XML-aware program, and that program can then parse and extract data from this business card. Now, that program may not know what a business card is or what the various tags mean, but because XML is an open text-based standard, any application that can read XML would be at least able to extract the data from the business card. All right, so now that we understand how to describe information, let's talk a little bit about what some of the advantages and disadvantages of XML are. So what are some of the advantages and drawbacks to using XML? Well, XML has several advantages. First, XML keeps content separate from presentation. You can take the data that your application uses and store it separately from the presentation. That way, regardless of what kind of presentation medium you're using, whether it's mobile or desktop or print media, you can just simply flow the data into various layouts and you can maintain a good separation between the content from how it's presented. XML is also an open format that can be read by many applications. And many applications today also have the ability to output XML, like Microsoft Office. So because it's an open format, you can store your data in a way that can be read by many different applications, even those that haven't been written yet. XML can be used on both the client and the server. It's just a data format. Today's modern browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer, and Safari can work with XML data. You can also use XML data in your applications, whether they're client applications or server applications. They're just a really good way of storing information. XML has widespread support in multiple languages and runtimes. You can use XML from Python and C# and .NET and Visual Basic and Java and lots of other programming languages like JavaScript, and across multiple runtimes. XML can be used on the .NET platform, the Java platform, iOS, Android. You can use XML pretty much just about anywhere. XML also makes it possible for disparate systems to exchange data. And these could be systems that were never designed to talk to each other in the first place. Let's suppose you have two computers and you want to share information between them. The problem is one of those computers is modern and speaks a certain language, and the other one of those computers is a little bit older and only knows a certain dialect. Well, what do? Well, XML can be used to help solve this problem. XML can create a bridge between these two computer systems so that they can exchange data even though they're not aware of each other. XML does have some drawbacks. First, it's not suitable for very large data sets. And when I say very large data sets, that actually might vary. It really is up to you. Once you start getting into things like gigabytes of data, XML is probably not the most efficient way of storing it. You should probably be looking at databases at that point. XML does make it easy to interchange data, but as far as storing large data sets, databases are probably still the way to go. Some data formats like JSON might be better in some cases depending on how you're going to use the data. If you know that the data is going to be used in a JavaScript execution environment, for example, there are some cases where JSON just might be more efficient. Some data types, like images, aren't represented well in XML because it's a text format. There is a way to do this. You can encode images and insert them into XML documents, but that gets pretty unwieldy pretty quickly, and even though it's possible, it may not always be the best way of doing it. And XML, when it gets really complex, can very quickly get hard to read. Now, if you're not planning on human reading your XML files, then this may not be a big deal, but it is something to be aware of. All right, now that we understand the drawbacks and advantages of XML, let's move on. Now that we've seen what XML is and what it's used for and some of its advantages and drawbacks, let's take a look at some real-world uses of XML so you can see how other organizations are using XML to solve data-related problems. So I've got the CNN website open here, and the URL I'm visiting is cnn.com/services/RSS. Now, RSS is a data format that is one of the ways that blogs are published. And if I scroll down here on the CNN site, you can see that there's a whole bunch of RSS feeds, which are XML documents that list various different news-related items. So let's go ahead and click on one of these. I'm going to click on the one for CNN Top Stories. Now, when I click on it, you'll notice that we don't get a screen full of XML code. What we're getting is a nicely styled page that has a whole bunch of stories here, right? But what I can do is right-click and choose View Page Source, and when I do that, I do get the XML code. So this is all pretty small, so let me just go ahead and zoom up the page so you can see the code a little bit better. All right, so right at the top of the page, here is the XML declaration, right? And then right underneath that is something called an XML style sheet declaration, and we'll see more of these later. Right here is the root tag, it's called RSS, and then you can see that there's a whole bunch of XML that describes things like story titles and links, and here's a tag called description, there's a copyright tag, a publication date, and each one of the stories in this news feed is described using XML. So applications like browsers, for example, that know how to read XML and know how to associate style sheets with them can give users a nice experience in reading their news stories. Now, I don't expect you to understand all of this code right now. We're going to get deeper into this as we go through the course, but you can see that using XML, CNN is able to provide a nice data-driven interface to their stories. Okay, so let's go ahead and close these two windows. Similarly, the New York Times does the same kind of thing. You can see that the New York Times, and here I am on newyorktimes.com/services/XML/RSS, and it's the index.html homepage for this. The New York Times is also using RSS, which stands for Really Simple Syndication, and they're using it to publish their blogs as well. So if I click on this link here, say the New York Times homepage, US, you'll see that once again, I'm getting a nicely formatted page. But again, when I right click and choose View Page Source, and again, I'm going to zoom the page up, you can see that they are also using RSS, and it's all just XML code to deliver their news stories. Okay, let's close this. All right, so that's blogs using RSS. Let's take a look at another example of real-world XML usage, and that's here on the weather.gov site. Now, I'm at the w1.weather.gov/XML /current_obs, which I guess means observations, index.xml. Now, when I go to this page, you can see that there's a statement here that says this XML file does not appear to have any style information associated with it. The document tree is shown below. So unlike CNN and the New York Times, this particular XML page does not have any style information, and therefore I'm just getting the raw XML here in the browser. And let me go ahead and zoom this up so we can see it a little bit larger. All right, there we go. Now you can also see that when I zoom the code up, that this is not RSS. This is a different dialect of XML that the weather service is using to describe weather conditions. And you can see here at the top, there are XML tags that describe things like, links and titles and so on. And then there's a whole bunch of XML tags named station. So here's a station right here, here's a station right here. Each one of these station tags contains information about the station identifier, where it's located, longitude and latitude, that kind of thing, and then further feeds that indicate what the weather is at that location. So weather service using XML to distribute weather-related information over the internet. All right, one more example. This one comes from Wikipedia, and it talks about the Microsoft Office XML formats. So in addition to being able to save Office files in their native Microsoft format, Microsoft also supports saving Office files as XML documents. And you can go to the Wikipedia site and learn more about this. But if I scroll down the page, you can see that there's a list of file formats that are supported in Office as XML. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And you can see that they've got a couple of examples here on the website. The first one here is for the Microsoft Word XML format. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of XML code here that describes a fully functional Microsoft Word document. And this one's fairly long, but it's a pretty good working example. And if we scroll down a little bit more, here's one for Excel. So this is the Excel XML format. Try saying that 5 times fast. And you can see I scroll through this example. It's just using XML to describe the contents of an Excel spreadsheet. So this should give you an idea of how widespread XML is being used and for various different purposes, for displaying news information, weather, file formats, for Office-related software. XML is really, really flexible and helps you solve a lot of different data-related problems.